Good morning, Northview. How you doing this morning? It is so good to see you. You guys are still barely awake. It's 10:45, guys. You had enough coffee yet? Let's go. Let's go. How are you doing this morning? Yeah, oh, there we go. There we go. Good to see you. Good to be joining with everybody online this morning. If you have a Bible that you came in here with or a Bible on your phone, Luke chapter 12 is where we're going to be today. We've been in a series for the last several weeks called TheConversationalist, and we've been looking at some parables that Jesus told. These itty-bitty stories that are just packed with gigantic application. Jesus had the ability to distill some really, really significant truths in a very approachable medium through these parables that he told. And we've been looking at some of his most famous, some of his most powerful, some of his most applicable parables, and we're going to continue to do so today. We're going to be talking about a rich fool today. And when I think rich fool, the most recent application that I have in my mind is the guys that went down to try to chase the remains of the Titanic. That is a classic example of some rich fools. I was intrigued, praying, interested in watching that whole journey, and then come to find out most of the narrative that we understood about it wasn't really the true narrative, that these guys were in trouble right from the beginning on this whole thing. But as the story began to come out, as we all watched the Ocean Gate disaster, you started to realize, man, stop sign after stop sign after stop sign had just been blown right through. And there was a lot of people that were saying, hey, this isn't really smart. This isn't really a good idea. And there were all kinds of reasons why. I have my own that have nothing to do with protocols and safety and all that kind of stuff. Like, for one, it's the Titanic. Guys, you just don't go after a wreck that was defined, like the definition of foolishness. Everything about the Titanic was about foolishness. The speed, the maneuverability, the decision-making of the captain, it was all foolishness, right? So don't compound foolishness. Secondly, don't name your organization anything Gate, ever. Nothing Gate ever works out. And I don't really want to make light of it because, some people really did perish in this whole tragedy. But on the other side of it, there's been such a conversation about how avoidable this was because the guys that were involved were just plain foolish in the way they thought, in the way they processed this whole experience, and what they subjected themselves to. We have a story in Luke chapter 12 where something similar, it's not plunging the depths of the ocean or anything like that, but it's a story that centers around a dispute the two brothers are having over an inheritance. If there's anything that translates 2,000 years later, it's inheritance squabbles. Man, those are ugly. Man, those are not fun to be a part of. I have had the unenviable privilege of being involved as an arbiter in some of these conversations over the years in ministry. It's like, hey, pastor, can you come in and be a part of this? Man, they never go well. This stuff is so hard, so frustrating, so difficult. Hearts and emotions and all kinds of mess gets caught up in it, and yet it's a reality. It's a reality of life. But that's where this story's backdrop finds it. Jesus was kind of early in ministry. He was gathering crowds. He was being seen as a truth teller, as someone who could distill life and really speak as the authority on issues. And so people would just come at him with problems, with issues, which is what we do still today. We come to him and say, fix this, change this, speak into this, give me wisdom, let's talk about it for me. And I think that's a valuable approach to take to Jesus, especially knowing what we know now. These guys didn't know he was going to die on a cross and rise from the dead 3 days later. We do. Anybody that can do that is worth listening to, is worth leaning into with everything that we have. These guys come to Jesus and they say, it says in Luke chapter 12 verse 13, someone in the crowd says to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And then he said to him, Watch out. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And then he told this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, well, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And there I'll store my surplus of grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Powerful little story. Has a kind of Ghosts of Christmas Past type feel to me, where you get a chance to look at the trajectory of life and kind of say, if you continue in this way of thinking, this is where you'll find yourself, or this is how God sees your moment right now. I've also thought about this story a lot, and the significance that Jesus doesn't call him evil, doesn't call him wicked. He calls him a fool. A fool. Think about when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, the life. He's saying everything that's real and true and the foundation of reality is seen through my lens. So if you have that guy say to you, you're a fool. I mean, no one wants to be told you have a PhD in D-U-M-B. But that's what happens in this story. He takes this question and says, let me get to the heart issues regarding this conversation about your brother and the inheritance, but let me kind of broaden it to this idea of money in general. Let me show you the foolish way to think about money. Let me show you the wise way to think about money. We're going to spend the majority of our time talking about the foolish ways that we think and this man in this story thought about money. It's a conversation that's important. It's a conversation that's crucial. It's a conversation that ties so directly to our heart and to our connection to Christ. One of the biggest things that gets in the way of our relationship with God is our relationship with money. So foolish thinking in this regard is important. Now, I love how this little story is full of such great teaching, because I think underneath it, you can see Jesus exposing for us the foolish thoughts that this man and all of us so regularly think. Like, for example, here's a foolish way to think about money. It's evidenced in this story. It's that money equals security. Money equals security. There is something in our mind and in our thought process that is incessantly, constantly, always telling us money is where our security lies. If you have more of it, you have more security. If you can accumulate, if you can stack it up, you can insulate yourselves from problems, and you can stop any kind of insecurity in its tracks. That's what this guy in the story thought. He said, I have plenty of good things laid up for years. Plenty laid up for years. But all the money in the world couldn't stop a midnight heart attack. All the money in the world couldn't stop the brain hemorrhage or the blood clot or whatever it was that ended up taking him out. Take a stroll through a hospital and you will be reminded how little security comes from money. You can go drive through a hospital parking lot and you'll see all kinds of different cars. You'll see really nice ones. You'll see ones with rust holes in them. You'll see ones you'd like to have. You can very much see a difference in the style of life that people are living, or the style of cars, at least, that people are driving. Good ones, bad ones. You get onto the actual floor and you take a peek into the rooms and you won't see any of that distinction. Everybody's the same. It's the same standard issue hospital gown with your butt hanging out. Everybody's in the same spot. Everybody. It's an equalizer for everybody. I think that's why, like a movie that came out in 2007, Bucket List, was so popular. Why it touched a nerve with so many people. You had Jack Nicholson, you had Morgan Freeman, one guy that has a bunch of money, one guy that's just kind of your average working class guy, and how they're both sharing a room together equals. Both facing terminal illness, both realizing it didn't matter how much one guy didn't have or how much money one guy did have. The security that comes from money was nowhere to be found. That's true on a health perspective. It's also just true on an employment perspective, on a business perspective, on where one moment things are going really well financially, and another moment things are not going so well financially. Did you know that of the original Fortune 500 companies, 1955 to today, there's only 49 of the 500 that are still in business today? That list every year is supposed to be a list of the 500 most powerful, most lucrative, most influential companies in our country. But since 1955, only 49 of them are still even around. I mean, has anybody heard of Zenith Electronics lately? Anybody heard of Brown Shoes, American Motors, Collins Radio, Studebaker? These guys were all among the leaders of the leaders in 1955. All that's changed. None of them are around today. Now, the most known companies are Tesla, and Amazon, and Facebook, and Google, and Microsoft, and Netflix. But someday, we'll look at them with nostalgia. Someday, we'll look back at them like I look back at Sears. If I said to my kids, man, Sears had it going when I was a kid. I mean, if you were buying toys at Christmas, Sears wish book, anybody circle that, dude? Yeah, circle it up, dog ear the pages. I mean, Sears was like the pinnacle of shopping. It was Amazon before Amazon, man. You had to call in and look at a picture on a page, and you had to rotary dial and dial it in, tell them the number of, I mean, it's crazy town. My kids would just, smoke would come out their ears. They wouldn't even know what I'm talking about. Sears failed? Yeah, it did. And so did a bunch of other brands that I could have never imagined failing. Stuff that's going well one moment very quickly can go a different direction. Money and wealth and success is so fleeting. 1 Timothy 6, verse 17 said, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty or to set their hopes in the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy." That's really what part of this story and this parable was about. Jesus was exposing the foolish thought process that says money equals security. It doesn't. It doesn't even in the slightest. Here's another foolish thought. Here's another foolish thought about money. It's that money equals significance. That if I have it, I will have an identity that is significant. I will have my place. I will be recognized as I appropriately should be. You can hear that in the man in this story's language. He talks about my crops, my barns, my harvest, my yield. There's a significance that he's drawing towards himself from what he possesses. What does God say about what we have, all that we possess? Psalm 24, verse 1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." Everything in it. Oh, no, I work hard. I've sweat and I've toiled, but elbow grease, hard work, pulled myself up. Where did you get that ability that you have? I'm not taking away that you've worked hard, that you didn't earn things, or that you didn't set out very intentionally to do it. But where did you get the mind that you have? Where did you get the muscles that you have? Where did you get the intellect that you have? How did you get connected the way you did? God has had a hand in all of this. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Significance attached to money can be a problem for you and I. And I don't know if we've ever seen it more represented in our lives than the wonderful game we love to play called Monopoly. Any Monopoly fans out there? A few of you? Okay. I was always a thimble or a shoe guy when I played Monopoly. My buddies always fought over the race car playing piece. I was like, no, I'll be the contrarian. I like the thimble. I like the shoe. That'd be me, right? It's a fun game if you win. It's a really frustrating game if you lose. Like, I could just about predict family discord in about 90 minutes every time you start playing the game of Monopoly. Maybe 60, depending on how many are going. But it is just about a surefire way to get people really ticked at each other, right? Because somebody at one point is going to get to a spot where they can't pay. And then what do you do in that moment? Do you offer any grace whatsoever, or are you ruthless and you say, nope, sorry, you're out if you can't pay. Give me everything you have. John Ortberg, pastor and author, tells the story about growing up playing Monopoly with his grandma. And he said that his grandma was just like this just cutthroat, ruthless Monopoly player. She was just so good at it. And as a kid, she would always beat him. Every time he would end in defeat, every time it was miserable, every time his little bitty old grandma just mopped the floor with him. She would acquire, and she would leverage everything she'd acquired to acquire more until eventually she would be able to run him off the board. And he says that one summer, I was just so tired of losing that I decided I'm going to learn how to play this game. Because she said that to him. Every time she'd beat him, she'd say, Johnny, one day you'll learn how to play the game. That was her parting shot. One day you'll learn how to play the game. He said, I learned. I set out, played with a neighbor kid, and we played every day. We played and we played and we played and we played, and I realized how to play the game. I figured out how to play the game. And so prepped with my newfound strategy, I sat down across from the table from my grandma, and I played her one more time in Monopoly. His description of this game is incredible. He said, that fall I sat down to play with her, and slowly and cunningly, I exposed my grandma's vulnerabilities. Relentlessly, I drove her off the board. This game does strange things to you. I can still remember it. It happened at Marvin Gardens. Can you just see it in your head? You're at the yellow properties in your head right now. I looked at my grandmother, and she taught me how to play this game. She's an old lady now. She's a widow. She had raised my mom. She loved my mom. She loved me. And I took everything she had. I destroyed her financially and psychologically. And I watched her give her last dollar and quit in utter defeat. It was the greatest moment of my life. And he says, but she had one more thing to teach me. She said, now it all goes back in the box. All the houses and all the hotels, all the railroads and the utility companies, all that property and all that wonderful money, now it all goes back in the box. Well, I didn't want it to go back in the box. I wanted to leave the board out. I wanted to bronze it maybe as a memorial to my ability to play the game. No, she said, none of it was really yours. You got all heated up about it for a while, but it was around a long time before you sat down at the board, and it will be here after you're gone. Players come and players go, but it all goes back in the box. The game always ends. For every player, it always ends. One of the biggest reasons Jesus calls this rich man in this story a fool is because he had everything going for him except he forgot one thing. Everybody ultimately has their life on this earth come to an end. Have you seen the statistics on death lately? They're not good. They're not good at all. 10 out of 10 of us, 100% of us have this reality at some point out in front of our lives. He thought he could have significance by accumulating, by having more. But he forgot one thing. That there's no point to being the richest person in the cemetery. There's no point at all to it. You can't take any of it with you. There's nothing that all that money and all that stuff will do for you once you die. It all goes back in the box. Everything you have, the titles, the clothes, the filled barns, the bulging portfolios, even your body, it all goes back in the box. It's foolish to think that our significance is attached to something that is so fleeting, especially when through Jesus, such great security and significance is offered to us by him, such that could never be taken away. Part of this parable is Jesus inviting you to move from a foolish way of thinking about your security, about your significance, and to placing your faith in Him so that you can find that security, you can find that significance, and it will never be taken from you. But we still have foolish thinking to do, and I think you can look into this story and see one more bit of it. And that's where he says, I will just eat, drink, and be merry. It's the idea, the foolish thought is this, that money equals satisfaction. That if I just have enough money, I will be more satisfied. I will be completely satisfied. I don't have to wonder if you've ever thought that. I know you've thought that. I know you are thinking that. I know that many times, many situations present themselves in life, and we think, if I just had more than what I have right now, I will be more satisfied. But here's what happens when we try to chase after more, when we try to accumulate more. A couple of things happen. One, buyer's remorse. You ever had buyer's remorse? You ever bought something that you were sure was going to change your life, and then once it didn't, you realize, I'm still staring at that same ugly, empty person in the mirror, and maybe it wasn't that thing. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me that has an issue. Or you look around, and whatever you get, somebody one-ups you, and now you're like, well, I had fun for 5 minutes having the newest car on the block. My dad, no joke, true story. After I went to college, and after I got out of college, and my brother and my parents had some money again because we were finally they were finally free of us. They started doing some fun things with their money. Okay, like Dad got a new truck. And he got a new truck, and it was a nice truck. Nothing too crazy fancy, but got a new truck, and it was new to him, and it was great. Like within weeks, his next-door neighbor got a Hummer. Like, this was when they first came out. They were hard to get. They were really expensive, and they were an absolute status symbol. Anybody over, 40, 35, you remember that day. You go under that, I don't know if this is going to make sense. Just take my word. It was a status symbol vehicle when you got a Hummer. Brent comes rolling up in this Hummer, and Dad's like, oh, geez. So much for having the nice truck. Look at that. That's so much cooler. Later next year, Dad got a motorcycle. Yamaha, street bike, nice bike. Within weeks, Brent comes rolling up in like an Orange County chopper. I mean, like, to put them next to each other and go, which one is cooler? I mean, like, it's not even an argument. To look at the cars, which one is cool? It's not even an argument. And you play this game, do you not? Where you think, if I just get there, and then you get there and somebody one-ups you. Or you get there and you go, well, now I got to upgrade it. Or now I got to put a little bit extra onto it. In 2018, Harvard Business School undertook a first-of-its-kind study. They studied 4,000 millionaires. 4,000 millionaires in the United States, asking them all, how much money would it take for you, if we gave you a scale of 1 to 10, how much money would it take for you to say, I'm at a 10? All of these guys and gals that are interviewed are millionaires. All of them. 26% said 10 times more than what we make right now. 24% said 5 times more. 23%, 2 times more. Only 13% of the respondents said, right now we're good. Right now we're good. We don't need to make anything else. We don't need to make anything else. Perhaps probably the most surprising of the whole thing was that the way these answers came in is that it didn't matter how much somebody made. The majority answers were 5 or 10 times more. If I had $1 million to my name every year, I'd want 5 or 10 times more. If it was $100 million that I made, I'd want 5 or 10 times more. It didn't matter how much it was. There was always this multiplier in their heads of what it would take to make them happy, to make them satisfied. Michael Norton suggests that the problem with so many millionaires is not that they have enough to be satisfied. It's that they continue to look around and they see all the other people. And the comparison game comes in. You start seeing what everybody else has. We are so prone to it. And our satisfaction is so prone to the comparison game. So I thought maybe since we are so prone to it, we should take a look around. Not just here, but just globally, to get a little bit of perspective on where you and I sit today in this conversation. Because I think when you read a story like this, there's many of you that go, oh, the rich guy, that's not me. That's not me. They're talking about somebody else in this room. They're talking about somebody else. But globally, if you take a look around our entire world, if you make $30,000 a year, you are in the 1% of wealth earners in the entire world. If you make $50,000 a year, you are in the 0.03, top 0.03 of wage earners in the entire world. In the entire world. That's mind-blowing. 3 billion people today will work all day for $2 or less. So when we take a look around and we play the comparison game, what we should see is that we are blessed beyond measure. We who live here in the United States, who have been given what we've given, I know we don't always think it. We don't always feel it. And the problem is when you don't think it or feel it, you don't act like it. You don't live like it. We've been given so much. And even though our nation's wealth has grown and grown and grown, and so it has in most industrialized nations over the last 50 years, doubled, even tripled. Instead of being more satisfied, what we see is depression rates keep continuing to go. Most of the time, people don't get a chance to see this until they go to a third world country. And if you've ever spent time in a third world country, you'll find yourself spending time with people who have infinitely less than what you have, and yet their joy is like triple, quadruple, 100-fold what you have. And you go, how are they happier than I am? They have nothing compared to me. They have nothing. Well, what it is that they have stopped trusting money for happiness. They've stopped trusting money for fulfillment. They've found it other places. Most specifically, they've found it inside of a relationship with Christ. So we don't want to be a rich fool. We don't want to live this parable. So how we do that is by having honest conversation with ourselves. Nobody wants to have this conversation. Like, I just know you didn't walk in here today to go, hey, let's talk about this today. Jesus talked about wealth and possessions and money a lot because he knew that it might be the thing that keeps you from him the most. Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your practices. So he would speak into it because he was after our heart. So let's look at the heart. And let's ask a couple questions of our heart, because I think it's a great way to help identify where am I and what needs to change in my life. For one, ask this question: am I hoarding? Am I hoarding what I've been given, or am I trying to accumulate so that I can have it all? To protect myself, to get my identity from it, to feel my level of satisfaction go up? Ask it, honestly. Ask this question: am I holding back? Specifically in the areas of generosity. Am I being stingy because I don't want to let go of what I have? Because I'm worried that if I do, I won't have the status or the security or the satisfaction. Am I hungering more and more and more? Do I have the kind of appetite where no matter what I buy, no matter how much I make, it's always, if I could make 2 times more, 5 times more. I need to have 10 times more. I think that's why these next verses that I want to read are going to be so important. Because these verses immediately follow the parable that Jesus told. And it's in effect Jesus interpreting the parable to say, this, instead of being foolish like this guy was, here's what I want you to do. And the words aren't going to be on the screen. I just want you to hear them. Just hear them. Jesus then said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, or what you'll wear. For your life is more important than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than birds? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you can't do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They don't labor or spin. Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which are here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, well, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? Don't set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Don't worry about it. For the pagan runs after all of these things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom first, and all these things will be given to you as well. Don't be afraid, little flock, for your Father's been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give to the poor, provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If I could just kind of reduce what he said and do a few bullets. The first one he would say is this, as it relates to money. Possessions and wealth. Don't worry. Don't worry. God's got you. He's got you. Don't worry about it. We worry and we are concerned and we make plans and we get our heads all wrapped up in it. God's got you. He's got you. Don't worry. The second part is this: be generous with people who are in need. You won't run out. Part of the reason we're not generous is we're convinced if we are generous, we won't have what we need to take care of ourselves. See point one, don't worry. Don't worry. God's got you. Be generous. Help those who are in need. You won't run out. Lastly, put the kingdom, God's kingdom, primary in your finances. You won't regret it. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. There may be no more practical way to take steps of faith closer to Jesus than to align your finances with his kingdom, with his agenda, with his desire to reach the entire world with his love. If I could just be real with everybody, this is not easy. But if I could be maybe clear about where the confusion and where the inconsistency in our faith is, it's right here. We as Christ followers have this incredible ability to do one thing but not the other, and it makes no sense at all. We will say, Jesus, I believe that you are God's Son, that you are sent to this earth to save me from my sins, that you died on the cross and were raised from the dead, and that when I die, you will escort me from death to life to spend eternity with you forever and ever in glory. We say, yes, Jesus, I trust you with my eternity. But then we say, no, I won't trust you while I'm here on this earth, living day in, day out as it relates to my resources. How crazy is that? Which one is harder to do? Is it harder to take somebody from death to life than it is to take them from stingy or hoarding or kind of pulling everything selfishly to themselves and turning them into somebody that's generous? Which is harder? I'm not saying either's easy, but which is harder? It's infinitely harder to take somebody from death to life, and yet you and I have boldly said, I trust you that when I die, you're going to take me to heaven. So if we can do that so confidently, may we also, with that same confidence, say, God, with what you have given me, I'm not going to point it back to myself. I'm not going to use it simply for my own gain. Let me make sure I hear this. You hear this. The message here is not that if you have wealth or resources or money, that it's evil. That's an application that would be the wrong application. The application is if you have been given, and I've made it clear, and we all have, such bountiful resources, may our heart not be sideways, directing it towards ourselves for our own gain, for our own status, for our own sense of security. But may it be turned loose, and may it be even a vehicle through which our relationship with God could grow and be stretched, and even yet through that, his kingdom could be advanced, and that I could see God move in my life in a way that's undeniable. if it all goes back in the box, if we can't take it with us, one of the things that we have to understand is, though that is true, we can send it on ahead. We can set our goal and our thoughts about accumulating towards eternity, which is so much bigger, so much grander, so much longer than our life here on this earth. That's what Jesus was doing with this parable. He was trying to get the eyes up of the listener to say, don't live this life on this earth like this is all there is. I've got so much more for you in eternity. So while you're here, use what I have given you. Use what I have given you to the advancement of the kingdom. When you and I do that, strongholds come down. When you and I do that, communities are changed. When you and I do that, lives are changed. Families are changed. Hearts are opened. So today, I invite you to take your step of faith towards Jesus, to fully surrender and to say, you are my Lord, you are my Savior, you are my guide, you have my whole heart. If you've never said that to Jesus, if you've never responded in that way, I just encourage you to do that via the code on the screen. Or as we sing this next song, you can meet me in the back. I'd love to pray with you, love to talk with you, help you process what that might look like for your life. So would you in this moment join me in standing, join me in prayer, join me in asking God to do this work in our hearts, not just in this one area, but in every area of our life, so that he can have fully committed followers. Heavenly Father, we love and thank you for your word, for how it challenges us, for God, how it answers questions in life, for how you have spoken your truth and given us the opportunity to orient our life around that truth. I pray that we do so today. I pray that we don't run or hide from what we've heard today, but that we embrace it and that we trust you fully, totally, and completely in all areas of life. We want you to commend us as wise, as faithful, as thorough in our relationship, follow through with you. May we do that more boldly today. We love you, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.